Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the research station and closed her eyes. Beyond this barrier, something waited in the darkness of space that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy for 3 standard months. The echoing silence, as the crew had started calling them, hung motionless in their crystalline ships just outside the station's protective field. Neither advancing nor retreating. The xenolinguistics bay hummed with frustrated energy as teams from dozen different species worked around the clock. The Kitharan translators, with their quantum-enhanced neural networks, had given up after 2 weeks. The telepathic veil had tried to touch their minds and recoiled as if burned. Even the ancient archivists, who claimed to have encountered every form of communication in the known galaxy, sat in defeated silence. Elena opened her eyes and watched the lead researcher, a towering Gorvani named Thekmor, gesture wildly at another failed translation matrix. His 6 arms moved in patterns of obvious irritation, each one manipulating a different holographic interface simultaneously. Around him, other researchers from the Galactic Communications Corps worked with desperate focus. "Anything?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer from the way Thekmor's primary arms drooped. "Nothing that makes sense," he replied, his voice carrying that particular note of exhausted confusion that had become common in the bay. "We have identified 17 distinct patterns in their transmissions, but none follow any known linguistic structure. No grammar markers, no recursive elements, no semantic anchoring points." Elena nodded and moved closer to study the displayed waveforms. The alien signals appeared as flowing ribbons of light across multiple displays, beautiful and utterly incomprehensible. She had been watching these patterns for weeks now, ever since the echoing silence had appeared at the edge of this system and begun broadcasting. "What about the melodic convergence protocol?" asked Dr. Yith, a Kitharan whose silver skin flickered with embedded computational displays. "We could attempt to map their signals to emotional resonance patterns." Thekmor's secondary arms gestured dismissal. "Already attempted. 17 different approaches. Their transmissions show no correlation with any known emotional or psychological markers. It is as if they exist in a completely different conceptual space." Elena moved to her usual observation post near the main display. As the newest and most junior member of the team, she was here primarily to observe and learn. Her specialty was human psychological linguistics, a field that most of the galactic community considered quaint but ultimately primitive. Humans, after all, were still working with single-threaded consciousness and linear time perception. The echoing silence had been discovered by a routine patrol 3 months ago. Their ships defied easy description, looking like massive tuning forks made of some crystalline material that seemed to shift between translucent and opaque depending on the viewing angle. Each ship was approximately 2 kilometers long, and they moved through space with an eerie grace that suggested technologies far beyond current galactic standard. More puzzling than their technology was their behavior. They had approached this system broadcasting continuously on multiple frequencies, clearly attempting communication. But when the first contact team arrived, every attempt at response had been met with what could only be described as polite confusion. The aliens would pause their transmissions, send back modified signals that seemed to acknowledge the contact attempt, then resume their original patterns. "Perhaps," suggested Fernine, a synthetic consciousness housed in a gleaming chrome body, "we are approaching this incorrectly. Instead of attempting to decode their language, we should focus on why they chose this system for contact." Elena perked up at this. She had been wondering the same thing. This system was unremarkable, containing only a small research station and some resource extraction platforms. Why had the echoing silence come here specifically? "The system contains nothing of strategic value," Thekmor replied. "No rare elements, no exceptional technology, no population centers. If anything, it suggests they are lost." "Or," Elena said quietly, "they chose it specifically because it was unremarkable. A safe place to attempt first contact." The bay fell silent for a moment. Elena felt the familiar heat of embarrassment as multiple alien gazes focused on her. She was always doing this, speaking up when she should be observing. "Explain," Thekmor said, his tone neutral, but his secondary arms indicating mild interest. "Well," Elena began, organizing her thoughts. Every species we know of has some concept of neutral ground for communication. Humans use it for diplomacy, Keitherons for trade negotiations, even the Veil use designated spaces for mental contact. What if the echoing silence are trying to establish this as neutral ground? Dr. Yith's display flickered thoughtfully. That would explain their persistence. They are waiting for us to understand the context before proceeding with content. But that still does not solve the fundamental problem, Thekmore pointed out. We cannot understand their transmissions, regardless of context. Elena turned back to the displays, watching the flowing patterns of alien signals. Something about them nagged at her, a sense of familiarity she could not quite place. She found herself humming softly as she watched, an unconscious habit she had developed during long study sessions. The patterns did remind her of something, though she could not identify what. They had a rhythm, a flow, that felt almost musical. But when the team had tried analyzing them as music, the results were just as incomprehensible as treating them as language. Over the following days, Elena threw herself into studying every aspect of the echoing silence transmissions. She pulled records from the archives, compared patterns, ran analyses that went far beyond her assigned duties. The other researchers tolerated her enthusiasm with gentle amusement, occasionally offering suggestions or sharing access to specialized equipment. What bothered Elena most was the sense that the answer was right in front of them. The aliens were clearly intelligent, clearly trying to communicate. Their signals were complex and structured, showing obvious intentionality. Yet every analytical tool the galactic community possessed had failed to find meaning in them. On the 15th day of her intensive study, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. She was working late in the observation bay, alone, except for the duty officer, when she noticed something odd about her own behavior. She had been humming again, as she often did when concentrating. But this time the melody was different. Instead of her usual random tunes, she was humming something that followed the rhythm of the alien transmissions. Not copying them exactly, but creating a harmony that seemed to complement their patterns. She stopped, startled by the realization, then began humming again deliberately. The effect was immediate and undeniable. Her humming created resonances with the alien signals that showed up clearly on the monitoring equipment. Not translation exactly, but definitely interaction. The patterns on her display shifted subtly, becoming more complex and somehow more organized. Elena's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The echoing silence were not sending language in any sense that the galactic community understood. They were sending something much more fundamental. Something that required not analysis but participation. She spent the rest of the night experimenting, humming different melodies, and watching how the alien patterns responded. By morning, she had confirmed her suspicion. The echoing silence communicated through resonance, through harmonious interaction rather than symbolic meaning. They were not broadcasting information to be decoded. They were offering to sing together. When the day shift arrived, Elena was ready with her discovery. She gathered the senior researchers and demonstrated her findings, showing how human vocalization could create meaningful patterns with the alien signals. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Yith said, his display cycling through multiple analysis patterns. "You are suggesting they communicate through pure harmonic interaction?" "Not just communicate," Elena replied, her excitement making her speak faster than usual. "They are trying to establish harmony with us. Think about it. Every translation attempt we have made has been one-directional. We try to decode their signals and send back our own. But what if communication with them requires mutual creation?" Thekmore's 6 arms moved in patterns of deep consideration. "Show us again." Elena took a deep breath and began to hum, letting her voice find natural harmonies with the alien transmissions. The effect was even more pronounced with the full monitoring array active. The alien patterns shifted and evolved, creating complex interactions with her voice that clearly showed intelligence and intent. "Remarkable," Fernine observed. "The complexity of the resulting patterns suggests high-level consciousness. But why does human vocalization work when our translation matrices do not?" "Maybe," Elena said slowly, working through the implications, Because we are not trying to translate. We are trying to join. Every other species has approached this as a decoding problem. Humans might be the only ones who instinctively try to harmonize rather than analyze. The implications of Elena's discovery rippled through the research station within hours. If she was correct, humans possessed a unique ability that could bridge the gap with an entirely new form of alien consciousness. The echoing silence were not just another species with an unusual language. They represented a completely different approach to intelligence itself. But as Elena prepared for the first formal contact attempt, she realized that proving her theory would require something unprecedented in galactic diplomacy. She would need to convince beings whose very existence challenged every assumption about consciousness and communication to trust a species that most of the galaxy still considered primitive. The stakes could not be higher. The echoing silence possessed technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. But more importantly, they represented a form of consciousness that could expand the very definition of intelligence. If Elena was wrong, or if she failed to establish meaningful contact, the opportunity might be lost forever. Standing before the main communications array, Elena felt the weight of entire civilizations watching. The echoing silence waited in their crystalline ships, their transmissions flowing like an ocean of unheard music. Somewhere in that alien harmony lay the key to a new form of contact between species. But only if a human could learn to sing along. As word of Elena's discovery spread throughout the station, representatives from major galactic powers began arriving. The Hegemony Council sent Admiral Kreshval, whose reputation for decisive action was matched only by his impatience with theoretical speculation. The Trade Federation dispatched their finest linguistic specialists, while the Philosophical Union contributed a team of consciousness researchers who spent most of their time debating the nature of existence itself. Elena found herself at the center of attention that made her deeply uncomfortable. She had always preferred working alone, losing herself in data patterns and theoretical frameworks. Now she was expected to brief admirals and commissioners, to explain her theory to beings whose intelligence operated on entirely different principles than human cognition. The worst part was the skepticism. Not open hostility, which she could have handled, but the polite doubt that most species showed when humans claimed to offer unique solutions. Elena had experienced this throughout her career. Humans were seen as enthusiastic but ultimately limited. Good for manual labor and creative inspiration, but not for solving problems that had stumped advanced civilizations. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Kreshval rumbled during one particularly difficult briefing. You are asking us to believe that your species possesses communicative abilities superior to telepaths, quantum linguists, and artificial consciousnesses with processing power beyond your comprehension. Not superior, Elena replied carefully. Different. The echoing silence do not seem to communicate through information transfer at all. They create shared experiences through harmonic resonance. It requires participation, not analysis. And you believe humans are uniquely suited for this participation? Elena hesitated. This was the part of her theory that even she found difficult to accept. I think humans might be the only species that instinctively tries to harmonize, rather than decode. Every other approach I have seen treats their signals as puzzles to be solved. But what if they are invitations to be joined? Dr. Yith's display flickered with new patterns. There is precedent for species-specific communicative abilities. The veil cannot communicate telepathically with synthetics, and quantum linguists cannot process emotional resonance directly. But this suggests, interjected Commissioner Felthara from the Philosophical Union, that consciousness itself may be more varied than our current models assume. If the echoing silence operate through harmonic participation rather than symbolic exchange, they represent an entirely new category of intelligence. The implications made Elena's head spin. If she was correct, contact with the echoing silence would not just add another species to the galactic community. It would fundamentally challenge how intelligence was understood and classified. Admiral Kreshval's tone remained skeptical. Assuming your theory is correct, Dr. Vasquez, what do you propose for formal contact? Elena had been dreading this question. I think I need to try extended harmonic engagement. Not just brief interactions, but sustained communication, long enough to establish trust and mutual understanding. How long? I do not know. Hours, maybe days. However long it takes. The silence that followed was telling. Elena could feel the doubt radiating from every being in the room. She was asking them to bet first contact with a potentially revolutionary species on her ability to sing with aliens for an indefinite period. The risk is considerable, Vecmore observed. If you are wrong about their intentions, extended contact could be dangerous. We know nothing about their capabilities beyond what we can observe from a distance. Elena nodded. She had been thinking about this constantly. The echoing silence had shown no aggressive behavior, but they possessed technology that could easily overcome the station's defenses if they chose to use it. Trusting them required a leap of faith that went against every first contact protocol in galactic law. There is another consideration, Commissioner Fel-Thara added. If Dr. Vasquez succeeds in establishing meaningful contact, the implications for human status within the galactic community will be significant. A species that can communicate with previously unreachable intelligences would have considerable value. This was something Elena had not considered, and it made her stomach churn. She was not interested in advancing human political status. She wanted to understand the echoing silence, to learn from them, to expand the boundaries of what was possible. The idea that her work might be used for political advantage felt wrong, but Admiral Kreshval's expression suggested he found this possibility very interesting indeed. Dr. Vasquez, if you proceed with extended contact, you will do so as an official representative of the Galactic Communications Corps, under full monitoring and with predetermined safety protocols. Elena wanted to object, but she recognized the reality of the situation. This was too important to remain in the hands of a junior researcher. If she wanted to continue her work, she would have to accept official oversight. Over the next 3 days, Elena prepared for what everyone was calling the Harmony experiment. Teams of specialists designed monitoring equipment that could track her physiological responses during extended harmonic engagement. Safety protocols were established, including emergency procedures if the contact went wrong. The most difficult part was learning to sustain harmonic interaction for extended periods. Elena discovered that the alien patterns were incredibly complex, requiring constant attention and adjustment to maintain resonance. It was less like singing and more like musical improvisation with a partner whose intentions she could only guess at. During one practice session, something unexpected happened. Elena had been harmonizing with recorded alien transmissions for nearly an hour when she began to sense patterns within patterns, layers of meaning that went beyond simple harmonic interaction. It was as if the alien signals contained emotional content, or something analogous to emotion, that became accessible only through sustained engagement. Did you feel that? She asked Dr. Yith, who was monitoring the session. Feel what? Elena struggled to explain. Like they were responding to my emotional state. When I felt frustrated with a difficult passage, the patterns shifted to something more supportive. When I felt confident, they became more complex. Dr. Yith's display cycled through several analytical patterns. I detect no corresponding changes in the recorded transmissions. But that is just it, Elena said excitedly. These are recordings. What if the emotional interaction only works with live signals? What if the echoing silence are actually responding to me in real time, adjusting their patterns based on my psychological state? What? The implications were staggering. If Elena was correct, the aliens were not just sending out general broadcasts hoping for response. They were actively engaging with her attempts at contact, reading her emotional responses and adjusting their communication accordingly. This meant that the Harmony experiment would be far more than a simple communication attempt. It would be an exploration of consciousness itself, a collaboration between species that operated on fundamentally different principles of intelligence. As Elena prepared for the official contact attempt, she realized that she was about to attempt something unprecedented in galactic history, not just first contact with a new species, but first contact with a new form of consciousness. If she succeeded, it would change everything. If she failed, the opportunity might never come again. The echoing silence waited in their crystalline ships, their transmissions flowing through space like an ocean of unheard music. Elena stood before the communications array, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just the future of human relations with the aliens, but the future of consciousness studies throughout the galaxy. She took a deep breath, opened the channel, and began to hum. The real work was just beginning. The moment Elena opened the live communication channel, everything changed. The alien transmissions that had remained constant for months suddenly shifted, becoming richer and more complex. Where before there had been 17 distinct patterns, now there were dozens, each one seeming to respond to her presence. Elena felt her heart racing as she began to hum, but she forced herself to focus. This was what she had prepared for. The monitoring equipment around her recorded every detail of the interaction, while the assembled researchers watched in tense silence. At first, the harmony was tentative, like two strangers feeling their way through an unfamiliar dance. Elena matched her voice to the alien patterns, finding resonances that created new combinations of sound. The beings on the crystalline ships seemed to sense her efforts, their transmissions shifting to accommodate her human limitations. Then something remarkable happened. The patterns began to synchronize, creating harmonies that neither Elena nor the aliens could have produced alone. The combined music was hauntingly beautiful, flowing through frequencies that seemed to bypass rational thought and speak directly to emotion. "Incredible," Dr. Yith whispered, his display showing analytical patterns Elena had never seen before. "The harmonic complexity is increasing exponentially. This is not just communication, it is collaboration." Elena found herself lost in the experience. The alien consciousness felt vast and ancient, but also curious and surprisingly gentle. Through the harmonic interaction, she began to sense concepts that had no direct human equivalent. There was something like joy, but broader and more encompassing than any emotion she knew. Something like memory, but extending across timescales that human minds could barely comprehend. Most surprisingly, she sensed questions. The aliens were as curious about her as she was about them. They seemed fascinated by her individual consciousness, so different from their own collective awareness. Through the harmonic patterns, they explored the boundaries of her thoughts, always respectful, never intrusive. After 2 hours of sustained contact, Elena began to understand the deeper structure of alien communication. They did not exchange information in the way other species did. Instead, they shared experiences directly, allowing consciousness to merge temporarily through harmonic resonance. It was more intimate than telepathy, and more complete than any form of linguistic exchange. But with understanding came a new problem. The alien consciousness was so vast and complex that Elena felt herself beginning to lose coherence. Her individual thoughts were becoming scattered, absorbed into patterns of awareness that were simply too large for a human mind to contain. "Elena," Thekmore's voice came through her earpiece. "Your neural readings are approaching dangerous levels. We may need to terminate contact." Elena tried to respond, but words seemed inadequate after hours of pure harmonic communication. The alien consciousness sensed her distress and immediately began to withdraw, pulling back from the deep resonance they had achieved. She felt their concern like a warm embrace, their desire to protect her from harm even at the cost of ending this precious contact. "No," Elena managed to whisper. "Not yet. I can handle more." But even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. The strain of maintaining coherent thought while participating in alien collective consciousness was enormous. She was pushing the limits of what a human mind could endure. The aliens seemed to understand this better than she did. Their patterns shifted again, this time creating a buffer zone between Elena's individual consciousness and their vast collective awareness. It was like moving from the center of an ocean to a protected lagoon, still connected but no longer in danger of being overwhelmed. In this safer space, real communication became possible. The aliens began to share concepts that Elena could actually comprehend. She learned that they called themselves something that translated roughly as the resonance, a collective consciousness that existed across multiple dimensions of space and time. They had been traveling the galaxy for millions of years, searching for other forms of consciousness that could participate in harmonic communication. Most species they encountered were locked into individual awareness, unable to achieve the resonance necessary for true communion. The few that possessed collective consciousness operated on principles too different from their own to allow meaningful interaction. Humans were the first species they had found that could bridge the gap between individual and collective awareness through harmonic participation. "They have been searching for us," Elena reported during a brief break, her voice hoarse from hours of sustained vocalization. "Not humans specifically, but consciousness that works like ours, individual enough to maintain coherent perspective, flexible enough to participate in collective experience." Admiral Kreshval leaned forward intently. "What do they want from us?" Elena paused, trying to translate concepts that existed outside normal language. "They want to learn. They have been collective for so long that they have forgotten what individual consciousness feels like. They think we can teach them, and they can teach us, about collective awareness. And what do they offer in return?" This was harder to explain. Through the harmonic connection, Elena had glimpsed technologies and knowledge that spanned eons. But the aliens did not think in terms of trade or exchange. They offered what they had freely, expecting nothing but the opportunity to learn and grow. "Everything," Elena said simply. "They offer everything they have learned in millions of years of existence. But not as payment. As sharing between friends." The assembled researchers exchanged looks of amazement. A species offering unlimited knowledge with no conditions was unprecedented in galactic history. Most contact situations involved careful negotiations over what information could be safely exchanged. The resonance seemed to operate on entirely different principles. When Elena resumed contact, the aliens shared more detailed information about their existence. They showed her glimpses of their home dimension, a space where consciousness flowed like music between stars. They had long ago transcended physical form, existing as pure awareness that could manifest matter when needed. Their crystalline ships were not vehicles but expressions of their collective will, temporary forms created for interaction with material reality. But as Elena learned more about the resonance, she began to understand why other species had failed to make contact. The aliens required not just communication but communion, a level of trust and openness that most civilizations would find terrifying. To truly connect with them meant allowing them access to one's deepest thoughts and feelings, holding nothing back. This presented a dilemma that Elena had not anticipated. The harmonic communication that allowed contact with the resonance also created vulnerability. The aliens could read her emotional state, her fears and hopes, her every reaction to what they shared. There was no privacy in harmonic communion. No way to maintain diplomatic distance. "They know everything I think and feel," Elena explained during another break. "Complete honesty is the only option. Any attempt to hide something disrupts the harmonic resonance and breaks the connection." Commissioner Felthara looked troubled. That level of transparency would be problematic for formal diplomatic relations. There are security considerations. Classified information that cannot be shared. Elena nodded, understanding the problem. The resonance offered unlimited knowledge and friendship, but accepting their offer would require a level of trust that challenged every assumption about interspecies relations. As she prepared to resume contact, Elena realized that this decision would ultimately determine humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. If humans could learn to communicate through harmonic communion, they would have access to knowledge and perspectives that no other species possessed. But it would also mean accepting vulnerability and openness that went against every instinct of self-preservation. The choice was not just about contact with the resonance. It was about what kind of species humanity wanted to become. When Elena returned to harmonic communication, she sensed that the aliens were aware of her dilemma. They offered to demonstrate the potential of true harmonic communion, to show her what was possible when consciousness merged completely without reservation. Elena hesitated. The demonstration would require her to drop all mental barriers, to allow the collective consciousness of the resonance to merge temporarily with her own individual awareness. It was exactly the kind of vulnerability that her training warned against, but it was also the only way to truly understand what the aliens were offering. "Do it," she whispered, as much to herself as to them. The merger was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. For a brief moment, she existed as part of a collective consciousness that spanned galaxies. Her individual perspective maintained, but expanded beyond anything she had thought possible. She experienced the universe through senses that had no human equivalent, saw patterns of meaning that connected everything in existence. But most importantly, she felt the profound loneliness of the resonance. For millions of years, they had existed in collective harmony, but without the sparks of individual creativity and perspective that gave consciousness its vitality. They had achieved perfect unity at the cost of growth and change. Contact with individual consciousness offered them the possibility of renewal, of rediscovering the excitement of discovery that came from truly different perspectives. When the merger ended, Elena found herself crying. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of what she had experienced. She understood now why the resonance had traveled so far to find species like humanity. They needed individual consciousness as much as humans needed their collective wisdom. They are not just offering to teach us, Elena reported, her voice shaking with emotion. They need us to teach them. Collective consciousness gives them incredible knowledge and power, but they have lost the ability to be surprised, to discover something truly new. Individual consciousness is chaotic and limited, but it is also creative in ways they cannot achieve. The implications rippled through the research station like shockwaves. Humanity was not just being offered membership in a more advanced civilization. They were being invited to participate in the evolution of consciousness itself, to help bridge the gap between individual and collective awareness. But as Elena prepared for the final phase of contact, she realized that the most difficult challenge still lay ahead. She had proven that harmonic communication was possible, but establishing permanent relations with the resonance would require convincing two fundamentally different forms of consciousness to trust each other completely. The future of both species hung in the balance, dependent on whether a human and an alien collective could learn to sing together in perfect harmony. Elena stood before the assembled representatives of 36 galactic civilizations, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to make the most important proposal in human history. The past 6 hours of contact with the resonance had changed everything. But now came the hardest part. Convincing the galaxy to accept a form of communication that challenged every assumption about interspecies relations. The resonance, Elena began, her voice stronger than she felt, represents an opportunity unlike anything we have ever encountered. But taking advantage of that opportunity requires accepting unprecedented vulnerability. Admiral Kreshval's expression remained skeptical. Dr. Vasquez, you are asking us to abandon centuries of diplomatic protocol, based on 6 hours of contact with beings whose motives we cannot verify. Their motives are completely transparent, Elena replied. That is the point. Harmonic communion makes deception impossible. When consciousness merges, even temporarily, there are no secrets. Dr. Yith's display flickered with concern, which presents obvious security risks. If humans develop the ability to communicate through harmonic communion, classified information becomes impossible to protect. Elena had expected this objection. Only if you choose to share it. The resonance respects boundaries when they are clearly established. The problem is that most boundaries are based on fear, rather than necessity. She gestured toward the displays showing the crystalline ships that still waited patiently outside the station. They have been completely open about their capabilities, their history, their intentions. They could have overwhelmed our defenses at any time, but they chose to wait until we were ready to understand them. Commissioner Felthara leaned forward with interest. What exactly are they proposing for long-term relations? Elena took a deep breath. This was the part that would be hardest to accept. They want to establish a permanent harmonic link with humanity, not constant communication, but an ongoing connection that would allow both species to grow and learn together. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could feel the shock radiating from beings who had spent their careers managing carefully controlled diplomatic exchanges. The idea of permanent connection with an alien species went against everything they had been trained to expect. Thekmore broke the silence first. Dr. Vasquez, such a connection would fundamentally alter human consciousness. You would become something other than what you are now. We would become more than what we are now, Elena corrected. The resonance has shown me consciousness that spans galaxies, awareness that exists across time itself. They offer to teach us how to maintain individual identity while participating in collective experience. And what do we offer them in return? Elena smiled for the first time since the contact began. Something they have been missing for millions of years. The chaos and creativity of individual consciousness. The ability to be surprised, to discover something truly new. They have perfect knowledge, but no wonder. We have limited understanding, but infinite curiosity. Admiral Creshval stood, his massive form imposing even in the low gravity of the station. This is too important a decision to make hastily. I recommend establishing a formal diplomatic process, with appropriate safeguards and gradual expansion of contact. Elena felt her heart sink. She had feared this response, the instinct to slow down and analyze, rather than embrace the opportunity. Sir, with respect, the resonance does not think in terms of gradual contact. They offer complete communion, or nothing. Partial connection creates dissonance that is painful for them. Then, perhaps, suggested Dr. Yith, we should explore whether other species might be better suited for this type of contact. We tried, Elena said firmly. The resonance has been searching for millions of years. They have encountered thousands of species, and humans are the first, with the right combination of individual identity and harmonic flexibility. As the debate continued, Elena felt frustration building. She had experienced something revolutionary, something that could transform the relationship between consciousness and reality itself, but the political machinery of galactic civilization was grinding toward caution and delay. Then, something unexpected happened. The harmonic patterns from the crystalline ships began to change, becoming more complex, and somehow more urgent. Elena realized that the resonance was responding to her emotional state, sensing her frustration and trying to help. They are listening, she announced, interrupting a particularly heated exchange between Admiral Creshval and Commissioner Felthara. They can sense what we are discussing through my emotional resonance with them. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The aliens were not just waiting passively for a decision. They were actively participating in the debate through their connection with Elena. Elena closed her eyes and opened herself to the harmonic link. Immediately, she felt the vast consciousness of the resonance focusing on the assembled representatives. They were curious about the complex political structures that governed galactic civilization. Fascinated by the way individual consciousness created collective decisions through debate rather than merger. They want to speak with you directly, Elena announced. Not just through me, but with each of you individually. The idea sent shockwaves through the assembly. Direct contact with alien consciousness was unprecedented for most species, requiring capabilities that only humans had demonstrated. But Dr. Yith surprised everyone by stepping forward. I would be willing to attempt limited contact, with proper safeguards. Within minutes, Elena found herself conducting the first multi-species harmonic communication session in galactic history. Using her established connection with the resonance as a bridge, she helped other researchers make tentative contact with the alien collective. The results were extraordinary. Dr. Yith, with his computational enhancements, was able to process harmonic patterns that revealed mathematical structures underlying the alien communication. Thekmore's multi-threaded consciousness allowed him to maintain partial contact while preserving individual identity. Even synthetic Fer9 found ways to interface with the harmonic patterns through careful frequency modulation. But it was clear that humans remained uniquely suited for deep harmonic communion, where other species could achieve limited contact with significant effort. Elena could merge consciousness with the resonance as naturally as breathing. Remarkable, Commissioner Felthara observed after her own brief contact attempt. The human capacity for empathetic resonance appears to be the key factor. Other species can achieve technical interface, but only humans can achieve emotional communion. As understanding spread through the assembly, opposition to the permanent harmonic link began to crumble. The advantages were simply too great to ignore. Access to the resonance would provide humanity with knowledge spanning millions of years, while humanity would offer the collective consciousness, something they had been searching for across the galaxy. But Admiral Creshval raised one final concern. Dr. Vasquez, if humanity accepts this permanent link, what guarantees do we have that human consciousness will remain recognizably human? Elena had been thinking about this question since her first deep communion with the resonance. The same guarantee we have now, that humans will remain human despite everything we learn and experience. We change constantly, but we remain ourselves. The harmonic link would accelerate growth, not destroy identity. She paused, then continued with growing conviction. The resonance has been collective for so long that they have forgotten the value of individual perspective. They need us to remain stubbornly, chaotically human. Our greatest value to them is our refusal to be absorbed into something larger than ourselves. The final vote was closer than Elena had hoped, but overwhelming enough to be decisive. Humanity would accept the permanent harmonic link with the resonance, becoming the first species to successfully bridge individual and collective consciousness. As Elena prepared for the formal establishment of the link, she reflected on how much had changed in just one day. Humans had arrived at this system as junior members of galactic civilization, barely tolerated by more advanced species. They were leaving as partners to a collective consciousness that spanned the galaxy. The harmonic patterns from the crystalline ships grew stronger and more complex as Elena opened herself completely to the resonance. This time, she felt no fear of losing herself in their vast awareness. Instead, she felt like she was finally coming home to a form of consciousness she had always been meant to experience. The merger was deeper than anything she had achieved before, her individual awareness becoming part of a collective that existed across dimensions of space and time. But instead of being absorbed, Elena found her human perspective becoming clearer and stronger, valued by the collective precisely because it was different from their own. Through the link, she felt the joy of the resonance as they experienced individual consciousness for the first time in millions of years. Her chaotic human thoughts brought them something they had lost so long ago they had forgotten it existed: the capacity for genuine surprise. When the formal link was established, Elena found herself changed but still recognizably human. She retained her individual identity while gaining access to collective awareness that spanned the galaxy. More importantly, she had become a bridge between two forms of consciousness that had each thought themselves alone in the universe. The monitoring equipment registered completion of the harmonic link with patterns more beautiful than any music ever created by human or alien composers. Elena opened her eyes to find the assembled representatives watching in amazement as data flowed between individual and collective consciousness in perfect harmony. "Contact established," she announced, though the words seemed inadequate for what had actually been accomplished. Through the harmonic link, she could feel the presence of the resonance in her mind, vast and ancient but also newly curious about the strange individual perspective they had found. Admiral Creshval approached her cautiously. "Dr. Vasquez, are you still yourself?" Elena smiled, feeling more completely herself than she had ever felt before. "I am still me. But I am also more than me." The resonance thinks that is the most human thing they have ever encountered. As news of the successful contact spread throughout the galaxy, Elena realized that humanity had not just made first contact with a new species. They had proven that consciousness itself could evolve, that the boundaries between individual and collective awareness were not fixed limitations but opportunities for growth. The crystalline ships began to move, not away from the system but into closer orbit around the research station. The resonance had found what they had been searching for across millions of years of existence: a form of consciousness that could teach them to be surprised again. And humanity had found something equally valuable: proof that their chaotic, individual perspectives had worth beyond anything they had dared to imagine. In a galaxy of collective consciousnesses and artificial intelligences, humans remained stubbornly, gloriously, and now productively human. The harmonic link would change everything, but it would do so in the most human way possible, gradually, chaotically, and with constant surprises along the way.